Let's generate our motivation. So check the state of your mind right now. Are there particular thoughts going on? Are there particular afflictions prominent? If there are a lot of thoughts, focus on the breath a little bit to help stop the chattering mind. If there's an affliction present, think of the antidote and contemplate that for a minute or so. And then when the mind is calm and free of extraneous thoughts, then think of the kindness of sentient beings and also think of their dukkha. And by contemplating these two, generate compassion, wishing them to be free from all the dukkha of samsara. And then, based on compassion, generate the wish to do something about the situation of sentient beings and alleviate their dukkha. And then know that in order to be able to do that, we need to purify our mind and develop all of our own good qualities. In short, to become a Buddha. And so generate the bodhicitta. And then feel happy at having the chance just to even contemplate bodhicitta and try to generate it. Yeah, because how many people in this lifetime have that opportunity just to think about that? Yeah, not so many. So even if our bodhicitta is a little bit fabricated, yeah, still, just by trying again and again to generate it, we're planting the seeds in our mind to be able to do so. Okay, so we're still investigating samsara, nirvana, and Buddha nature, and we're still on the chapter about afflictions and karma and their seeds and latencies. So at the last section, I think it's the last section in that chapter, is virtue, non-virtue, merit, and roots of virtue. Okay, so we hear these terms all the time, but we may not be totally clear on what they mean. Okay, so the principal cause of happiness is virtue, and the chief cause of suffering or dukkha is non-virtue. Okay, being able to discern the difference between these two so that we can practice the former and abandon the latter is essential for making wise choices in life and for accomplishing the path to liberation and awakening. So two things are difficult. To tell the difference between dukkha and not dukkha. Okay, now the first kind of dukkha, the dukkha of pain, we can all tell the difference between pain and not pain. That one's not so hard. The second one, the dukkha of change, which is what we usually call happiness. In other words, when the suffering of longing for something or not having something decreases, and the happiness of having it simultaneously increases, we call that happiness, even though it's a temporary state, and eventually that happiness that was coming up will then go down. Okay, but when we feel happy in samsara, we don't think of it as dukkha, as an unsatisfactory state. Yeah, we're very focused on the dukkha of pain and wanting to avoid that. But the dukkha of change we kind of like, and we don't recognize it as dukkha. You know, my stomach is full, I live in a nice place, I have friends, and my life is going well, and I'm successful. And we think that's, joy. Yeah. And if it were, then it would never decrease. And it would never bring new problems. But whatever happiness we have brings new problems with it, which start small, and so we don't see them, and then they grow bigger. And then that happiness also vanishes. We've all been very happy at different times in our life. Where is that happiness now? Yeah, where is it? It's not here. If that happiness was really ongoing, we would be wherever we were, with whoever we were with, enjoying it now. But we aren't, because that happiness faded away. Okay, so we're here because we realized that something in our usual way of thinking about happiness is incorrect. Okay. So that second one, discriminating happiness and suffering, we're not always so good with that one. The third kind of dukkha is the pervasive dukkha of conditioning, just having a body and mind under the influence of afflictions and karma. Okay? Do you think that's unsatisfactory? Or do you think, gee, I have this body and, my body can give me so much pleasure. I can eat good things. I can have sex. I can listen to music. I can go dancing. My body brings me happiness, and I have this mind, and, it brings me happiness, and I don't want to give them up. Definitely, I do not want to give my body up, because that would mean that I would die. Yeah. So do we really think that having a body and mind under the control of afflictions and karma is dukkha, is unsatisfactory? Only when the body and mind hurt. Yeah, the rest of the time, we think it's fine. Yeah, and even when our body hurts, we don't want to give it up. Yeah, we just want it to feel better. Okay, so discriminating really between samsaric dukkha and happiness is quite difficult. And then to discern the causes of each one is also difficult, because we usually think the causes of happiness are some external person, object, or situation. Yeah, and the causes of our misery are also some specific person, object, or situation. Okay, now according to the Buddha's teachings, are those the actual origin of our happiness and unhappiness? Some of you don't look like you're so sure. Yeah. Yeah, really. I mean, the cause of my suffering, my teachers, my boss, my husband, my kids, they're also the things I love the most. But they're also driving me nuts sometimes. Yeah. So we don't see that the actual cause of happiness and suffering is inside here. Okay, so just figuring this out. What is dukkha? What is not dukkha? What's the cause of dukkha? What's the cause of happiness? We need a lot of contemplation on that. Otherwise, we're going to keep doing the same old thing, looking for happiness, but winding up with more pain. Yeah. So in general, virtue is that which brings an agreeable result, and non-virtue is that which brings a disagreeable result. Okay. Again, sometimes we can't tell really the difference between an agreeable result and a disagreeable. We can see when things are agreeable in this very moment and we're happy, but we can't always determine if that's really a good result in the long term. Yeah. Because when you get the promotion, you feel great. But really, is a promotion what is going to increase your self-esteem? Yeah, we think it is, but is it? Yeah. If it were, then we wouldn't be seeking the next promotion after that one. Mm-hmm. Okay, so here virtue includes constructive intentions and actions, both of those. And these leave the seed of virtue on the mind stream, and these seeds ripen into agreeable results. Okay, so while mental states and actions may be virtuous or non-virtuous, the seeds of karma and the latencies of afflictions, and also the seeds of afflictions, are neutral. Okay, this is because virtue and non-virtue are linked to our intention. An action becomes virtuous or non-virtuous primarily due to our intention. The seeds and latencies, however, do not have that strong, active, intentional element. They're what's left over after the action. So because they lack that strong, active, intentional result, the seeds and latencies are neutral. Okay? So thus we speak of the seeds of virtuous karma, because the actions were virtuous, but the seeds, what's left over, are neutral. Okay? So we speak of the seeds of virtuous karma, for example, not the virtuous seeds of karma, because the seeds themselves are not virtuous, they're neutral. We talk about the latencies of non-virtuous afflictions, not the non-virtuous latencies of afflictions. Okay? So people get this confused a lot, so it's important to remember this. Similarly, pleasant or unpleasant ripening results. What's a ripening result? The rebirth. What's another term that's often used for ripening result? Maturation result. The maturation result. Okay. So similarly, the pleasant or unpleasant ripening results of virtue and non-virtue are neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. Okay. So here what we have is virtue can give way to something that's neutral, and virtue can ripen into something that's neutral. And the same with non-virtue. Okay? Non-virtue can go into a seed of non-virtue, which is neutral, and it can also ripen in a lower rebirth, but the rebirth itself is neither virtuous or non-virtuous. Okay? Because the rebirth, we talk of it very often in terms of the body, and this body is neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. Okay, it just is. So don't get confused. Something can be in the nature of dukkha, okay, unsatisfactory in samsara, but that doesn't mean it's non-virtuous. Okay, the body is dukkha in nature, but in itself, this thing, flesh and blood, is not non-virtue. Okay. So being born in a healthy human body is a result of virtue, but the body itself is ethically neutral. We can use the body to create virtue and non-virtue, but the body itself is neutral. Okay. Possessing wealth is an agreeable result of virtuous actions of generosity, but being wealthy itself is neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. And we can use the wealth to create virtue, we can use the wealth to create non-virtue. Okay, so this is something very interesting to think about. That just getting the good result, the result itself is not virtuous just because it's a happy result. The cause was virtuous, but the result wasn't. You think, a bunch of $100 bills is virtuous? It doesn't have any ethical dimension. It's just paper. Okay, so it's our intentions and our actions that create the virtue or non-virtue. Okay, so what does virtue refer to? So Asanga's Compendium of Knowledge speaks of 5 types of virtue. Now here we come into something that we see often in how they categorize things, that something may be categorized as a type of something, like the next 5 are types of virtue, but that doesn't mean all of them are virtue. Okay? Because in this list of 5, there are some that are virtue and some that themselves are not virtue. Okay, so if you haven't read ahead, listen well here, and even if you have. Okay, so the first type of virtue is natural virtue. Okay, so the natural virtues include the 7 virtuous mental factors. Okay, faith, integrity, consideration for others, non-attachment, non-hatred, non-confusion, joyous, effort, pliancy, conscientiousness, non-harmfulness, and equanimity. So Venerable Sangha Kadra went through these with, in one of her recent courses. So these are called natural virtues because their nature is virtuous. When any of these mental factors arise in the mind is virtuous. And also, they're called natural virtues because they naturally bring a pleasing result. Okay. Then the second type of virtues are related virtues. So these are the primary consciousnesses and mental factors that become virtuous because they are accompanied by virtuous mental factors. So remember, when we have a cognition, there's the primary mind, and then you have, which is, using one analogy, is like a light, and then we have other lights that are also shining in with that light and mix with it. Okay, so the 5 omnipresent mental factors, okay, what are they? What? Contact, feeling, discrimination, intention, and attention. Okay? So those 5 by themselves, without being affected by anything else, those 5 and the primary consciousness are not virtues or non-virtues. Okay? They become virtuous or non-virtuous when you have another mental factor that is conjoined with them in that same mental state. Okay, so you have your primary mind, you have the 5 or the 5 omnipresent minds, plus you have conscientiousness and you have integrity. So those 2 are natural virtues, and they make the primary mind and all the other mental factors virtuous because they're all together in the same mental state. Okay, it's like when you may have some broth and 5 different vegetables, but when you put chili in, it affects the whole thing. Okay. So, something like that. Okay, so when compassion is present, the mental primary consciousness and the mental factors of intention, feeling, and so forth that accompany it become virtuous. Okay, so the related virtues, when they're mixed in like this with something virtuous, then the whole thing becomes virtue. Okay. Then the third one is called subsequently related virtues. So these are the seeds and latencies of virtue established by virtuous consciousnesses and mental factors and by virtuous actions. For example, the karmic seed created by the mind of generosity. Okay, so what's that karmic seed? What is it? Is it virtue? It's neutral, okay? but it was created by a mind that was virtuous. So seeds and latencies are not actual virtues. This is an example of the name of the cause. In other words, in this example, the virtuous path of action being given to the effect, the seeds and latencies of virtue. So you find this a lot in Buddhist studies. The name of the cause, or something that applies to the cause, is given, the name is also given to the effect. Okay? So the cause of a virtuous seed, a seed of virtue, from, let's say, generosity, that cause, the mind and mental factors, is virtue. And because it's virtue, we give the name to the result, which is the seed of generosity that's left on the mind stream. So that seed itself is not virtuous, it's neutral. Okay, so that's what it means. We give the name of the cause to the result. Sometimes we give the name of the result to the cause too. For example, when you plant the garden, you say, I planted cabbage or I planted squash. Actually, you didn't plant cabbage or squash. You planted the seeds of cabbage or the seeds of squash. But there you gave the name of the result, the vegetable that's going to grow, to the name of the cause, the seed that you actually planted. Okay. So, our speech is often very inexact, but we know what we mean anyway. When you come in and say, we planted carrots today, I know that you didn't take a bunch of carrots out of the refrigerator and go and put them in the dirt. Okay. Okay. Then the fourth are virtues due to motivation. So these are the physical and verbal actions motivated by the naturally virtuous mental factors. Okay. So the action of making a donation to a charity is a physical virtue when done with a generous motivation. So there's an intention in the mind that's virtuous, an intention of, let's say, non-attachment, that leads to the physical action of making the donation. Okay? So that physical action is also a kind of virtue, according to some of the schools. Okay? So Vaibhasikas and Prasangikas assert that virtue includes both minds and forms. So they consider virtues due to motivation. Okay, the things you had the motivation and then you acted. So the virtues due to motivation, which are physical and verbal actions motivated by virtuous mental states. The Vaibhasikas and Prasangikas say that these actions are virtues. Okay, since pratimoksha precepts are form, according to these two schools, the precepts are virtuous forms. Okay, so the pratimoksha precepts, the layman and laywoman 5 precepts, the one-day precepts, the novice, male and female precepts, the nuns training precepts, and then Bhikshu and Bhikshuni precepts. Okay, so these are all considered forms by those two schools because you can see them. I mean, when somebody, when somebody kills somebody, when somebody is generous, you can see the action. Okay, so the action's considered form. According to Satantrikas, Chittamadhyans, and Svatantrikas, only minds can be virtues. They don't consider the actions themselves virtues, just the motivation. Then ultimate virtue is the fifth one. And ultimate virtue is emptiness, because realizing it eradicates all obscurations and enables virtue to flourish. Emptiness, however, is not an actual virtue because it is permanent and itself does not produce results. Okay, so emptiness is called virtue because the mind that realizes it is virtuous, and that mind can free us from samsara. But emptiness itself is permanent. It doesn't change. So it itself cannot be the cause of virtue. Okay? So this list of virtues is not exhaustive. The other virtues include, but are not limited to, a Buddha's speech and the 32 signs and 80 marks of a Buddha. Okay? So the Buddha's speech with its 60 qualities, that is virtue. It's virtuous form. It can be heard by the auditory consciousness, and the 32 signs and 80 marks of a Buddha's body are also virtue, and they can be seen with the eye. Okay. So even a moment of natural virtue can have far-reaching results. When the mental factor of conscientiousness arises in the mind, the primary consciousness and mental factors associated with it all become virtuous. The physical and verbal actions done with that motivation are also virtuous. While the karmic seeds of those actions are neutral, they carry the potency for agreeable results to arise, and for that reason, they are called subsequently related virtues, although they are not actual virtues. And like we said before, the actual results from those actions are not virtuous. Okay? So commensurate with the 5 virtues, there are 5 non-virtues. So natural non-virtues are mental factors such as attachment, anger, jealousy, and resentment that are non-virtuous by nature. Okay, so all of these, they arise in the mind, they are non-virtuous. We have to be careful here with the word attachment, because sometimes it's used. They'll say, for example, that Chenrezig is attached to all sentient beings. But it doesn't mean Chenrezig has samsaric attachment. What it means is that Chenrezig cares so deeply and fervently about all sentient beings. But that's not the attachment that's not actual attachment. It's called attachment. Okay? You'll get used to it. A lot of things are not what they're called. Okay? Okay, then the second of the 5 non-virtues are related non-virtues. They're the mental primary consciousness and mental factors that accompany a naturally non-virtuous mental factor. Okay, so you're fed up and you're having a temper tantrum. Of course, we're adults, so we don't have temper tantrums. We are enraged. Does that sound polite enough? Yeah. But that that mental state of being enraged or resentful or spiteful, that is one of the related non-virtues. Okay. Then third, subsequently related non-virtues are the latencies left on the mind by non-virtuous minds and mental factors. Okay, so like we talked before, the seeds and the latencies, they weren't actual virtues. Here, they're not actual non-virtues, but they're ethically neutral. Then 4, non-virtues due to motivation are physical and verbal actions done with a non-virtuous motivation. Okay, so that's according to the Vaibhasikas and the Prasangikas. Then the ultimate non-virtue is, for example, samsara, which breeds non-virtue, although it is not an actual non-virtue. Just as emptiness was not an actual virtue, although realizing it frees us from samsara. Okay. So in general, virtuous karma and merit are synonymous. In the context of samsara, they are actions that have the ability to bring favorable results. Calling an action virtuous or meritorious emphasizes that it is psychologically healthy and ethically irreproachable. So that's good to think about, when you have a virtuous intention in your mind, psychologically, your mind is healthy at that moment. Yeah, you're seeing things in at least a conventionally accurate way. You're not seeing them as illusions, which requires the realization of emptiness, but you're not putting a lot of excess garbage on things. So psychologically, the mind is healthy, and ethically, the mind is irreproachable. It's virtuous, and nobody can come along and say, "Oh, you had a stinking motivation." Well, they can come along and say that, but it doesn't mean it's true. Okay. In terms of spiritual progress, virtuous actions enrich the mind. Okay. So they enrich, well, maybe I'll go through all these and then go back and explain them. They enrich the mind, establishing the foundation for generating the realizations and excellent qualities of arhats, bodhisattvas, and Buddhas. Okay, so one of the effects of doing virtuous actions is that it fertilizes the mind. Purification is like clearing the mind out of the seeds and latencies of non-virtue we've created. And, accumulating merit is this process of enhancing the mind. So if the mind is like the ground that we're going to plant the seeds of listening to teachings in, we have to prepare the ground. So we have to take out the bubblegum wrappers and the shards of glass and what else are you finding in the ground? All sorts of stuff, okay? So you have to take all that out. That's like purification. And then you have to put some fertilizer in. So that's like creating merit. Okay. Then when we listen to teachings, something goes in. Yeah. But if the mind is like so full of garbage and the seeds from previous non-virtue, then even we hear teachings, we don't understand them so well. And you can witness this when people come and they first hear teachings, and some people go, "Wow, this really makes sense." And other people are going, "What in the world? What am I doing here? What these people are talking about is nonsense." Yeah. So you can see who's coming in with a mind that has a lot of non-virtue seeds obscuring it. And it's not only the non-virtue that can do that. It's also you may have cleaned the ground and taken out, the glass shards and so on. But if you don't put water and fertilizer in, you can put those seeds in and nothing's going to grow. So similarly, we may have done some purification, but if we don't collect merit, then, again, we're not going to be able to understand the teachings. And although this sounds, the gardening example, there's a lot of gardening examples in Buddhism. I've just been working this whole time with, things not produced by self, other, both, and causelessly. And you feel like you're in a gardening class, talking about seeds and sprouts all the time. But you can see after you've done like a purification retreat, if you've done Vajrasattva, if you've done 100,000 prostrations, okay, if you've worked on accumulating merit, you've done 100,000 mandala offerings, okay, or taking refuge, well, all the practices both purify and accumulate merit, okay, but they're usually more balanced towards, or they're usually more emphasizing one or the other. But you can tell after you've done that, when you sit down and read a book or go to teachings, you understand things in a way that you didn't understand them before. Yeah. And so it's very interesting. Those of you who have been around a while, because sometimes we feel like, my mind's not changing at all. But go and read the notes of a teaching that you took 5 years ago, or read a Dharma book that you read 5 years ago, and see if you understand, or listen to the teaching, that's even better, and see if you understand the teaching better now than you did 5 years ago when you first heard it. Yeah. And that's when you'll really see the effect of purification and accumulating merit. Yeah, you can begin to see them. Now, I remember, after doing Vajrasattva retreat, which I told you, it was my meditation was mostly the object was myself, and occasionally I got distracted and thought about Vajrasattva. But despite that, when I went back that autumn to Kopan again to listen to teachings, I was going, oh, wow. This is entirely different than it was last year before I had done the Vajrasattva retreat. Okay. In the context of the two collections of merit and wisdom, merit is that which it should have primarily in here. Primarily has the capacity to give rise to the form body of the Buddha. Okay. In general, the expression root of virtue refers to a virtuous mental factor, although it also seems to indicate the seeds of virtuous karma. Now you hear root of virtue, root of non-virtue, you hear these terms a lot. They are one of the ones, root of virtue, that I've asked many teachers, what does this mean? Yeah, because what's the difference between virtue and root of virtue? I haven't gotten a clear answer. Have you gotten one? They're different terms, but they seem to kind of mean the same thing. Okay.
In Vasubandhu's Abhidharma Kosha, it says the roots of virtue are the three, what do they call it? Like non-attachment, non-anger, and non-ignorance, the three that are opposite to the three poisons. So that's one explanation of root of virtue.
Of the roots of
Roots of virtue. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So in general, the expression root of virtue refers to a virtuous mental factor, although it also seems to indicate the seeds of virtuous karma, because they say that wrong views and anger can destroy the roots of virtue, but they're going to destroy or inhibit the seeds of the virtuous karma, not the actual mental factor. So it's, yeah. Okay. Shantidevas engaging in the bodhisattva deeds and Chandrakirti's supplement contain extensive discussion about anger destroying the roots of virtue. Okay. So when anger destroys the roots of virtue, or when wrong views or other heavy non-virtuous actions cut the root of virtue, it prevents future agreeable results from coming about, even when suitable conditions are present. So if you remember before, we talked about anger and wrong views diminishing, reducing, and thoroughly making them disappear. Thoroughly, what was the word? What? Third, no, it wasn't. Yeah, it was something like that, thoroughly eliminating or something like that. Okay. And so the diminishing meant that the karma, and when we say karma, sometimes we mean the action, sometimes we mean the seed of the action. But the karma could ripen, but just not in a strong way. And reduce means that it won't ripen again so forcefully. It's the strength of it is reduced. And then thoroughly thoroughly consumed means that the seed is still there, but the good result doesn't come about. Okay. So when human beings cut the root of virtue, it affects only the root of virtue related to the human realm. The root of virtue of the higher realms remains. They may still encounter fortunate conditions in the future and again regain their root of virtue. Okay, then there's a reflection. Review the different types of virtue, which are actual virtue and which are just called virtue, and make examples of each of them in your life. Okay, let's do that. Okay, example of a natural virtue. Kindness. Okay. An example of related virtues. Kindness. Okay. Okay. Subsequently related virtue. Yeah. Of what? Yeah. Okay. This is the seed and latency of the mind of kindness. Virtues due to motivation. Yeah, speaking kindly to somebody. Yeah, or acting kindly. And the ultimate virtue? Yeah. Maybe realizing the emptiness of that. Yeah.
So it says that emptiness is the ultimate virtue. So the emptiness would be number 5, but the mind that realizes it would be a virtuous mental, so that would be number 1.
Yeah, that wisdom mind. It might be actually the second, the related ones, because it's talking about the whole mental state. Usually when we talk, it could, if you're talking about just the mental fact of wisdom, it would be the first. If you're talking about the whole mental state, it would be the second. Okay. Okay. What about, what's natural? An example of a natural non-virtue? Anger. Okay. A related non-virtue? Yeah. Yeah. That would be a good example. And also the primary consciousness and everything. A subsequently related non-virtue? Yeah. Okay. The non-virtues due to motivation? You have to have it has to be a verbal or physical action. Guilt isn't killing. I thought you said guilt. Okay. Hey, you aren't working.
So it would have to be a mind killing with anger. You could kill somebody accidentally.
Yeah. So mind killing with anger. Okay, and then the ultimate non-virtue is samsara, but it's not really a non-virtue. Okay.
Because samsara, what is samsara? It's our contaminated aggregates, right? Yeah. And among our contaminated aggregates, some of them are mental states, and it seems that those could qualify, at least some of them, not all, but some of those could qualify as actual non-virtues.
Yeah, those would qualify as actual non-virtues. But the body, which is, when we talk about the 5 aggregates, often they emphasize the body wouldn't be non-virtuous.
And just one other little splitting of hairs, when it says that natural non-virtues are mental factors such as attachment and so on, but only attachment in the desire realm is a non-virtue, not in the upper realm. So it's not all attachment that would be non-virtuous.
Okay, so we can put attachment in the desire realm. Can add that too.
So back to the samsara. So also can be in the continuum of a samsaric being, there can be neutral mental factors.
Oh, yeah.
But those would still fall under ultimate non-virtue because they're part of samsara.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just samsara itself is not, samsara as a whole is not non-virtuous. But some things that are part of samsara are non-virtuous.
Right, but it's listed as number 5, the ultimate non-virtue samsara, but it's not an actual non-virtue.
Right. Yeah, because the actual whole of samsara, you wouldn't say is non-virtuous, although elements of it are. Okay, so that's then the point 2. Review the different types of non-virtue, which are actual non-virtue and which are simply called non-virtue, and make examples in your life. Yeah. So this is something interesting to be aware of as you go through the day. Okay. When is there something virtuous? When is non-virtuous? Which kind of virtue is it? Which kind of non-virtue is it? Yeah. And, if you play with these kind of categories during the day, it keeps your mind focused on the Dharma. Whereas if we don't, we may get really irritated at somebody, but we don't recognize that it's non-virtuous. Whereas if you're really trying to work with these things and notice them in your life, when you're irritated, immediately you'll say, oh, this is a non-virtuous mind. And then you'll want to do something about it.
Going back to, again, that only the Vaibhashikas and the Prasangikas see the action as form.
Mm-hmm.
Have we talked before about how it came out that the Dharmaguptaka Vinaya also recognizes the precept body when principally they're not prasangika?
People, when you say you're this or that school, even in ancient India, those are loose classifications. Not everybody in that group has the same thing. You know, like you can say Republican and Democrat. Do all the Republicans have the same view on every issue? Do all the Democrats do? No. Those are kind of loose terms. Okay. And also, what's interesting is from the Tibetan viewpoint, all the Vinaya schools, the Dharmaguptaka including, it's one of the 18 Vaibhasika schools. So they would say that. That's according to the Tibetans. When you say to the Chinese, they go, Vaibhasika? You know, we've hardly ever heard of them. The 18 schools are not all Vaibhasika. Vaibhasika is something that came about later with the Mahavaibhasa treatise. So they have totally different view. And the Theravada secret also. Okay, yeah?
In the Chinese commentarial tradition, you know, the precept body is a seed in your eighth consciousness. You are taught that at the foreordination.
Yeah. Yeah. So that corresponds to Chittamadra. But, yeah. But when you visualize it, it's like its form coming into you. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. But you can still do the Dharmaguptaka ordination and not think of the seed going into your eighth consciousness. Yeah. So this is what I mean, you know, we shouldn't get too catechismic, like catechism. Yeah, catechismic. It sounds like yeah. Anyway, okay. So chapter 6 is karma, the universe, and evolution. So this chapter is quite an interesting chapter. Some of it, there's some things from the Pali scriptures that are talked about here that the Tibetans don't talk about. And then some of it is from a personal discussion that I had with His Holiness. In fact, one of the very first times I went to see His Holiness was, I don't know, late 70s, early 80s. It was a long time ago. And I asked questions about this. And His Holiness said, wait. He then called Gareth Sparham, who was a student at the dialectic school, to come and translate for it. It was, he had a translator there already, but he wanted, a translator that was really specific. So that was quite interesting. Okay. True dukkha includes sentient beings and our environment. Okay. So not all dukkha is non-virtuous. The environment isn't non-virtuous. So the environment is a true suffering, but it's not non-virtuous. So you have to keep these things straight. Otherwise you think, everything that is a true suffering is non-virtuous, and that's not true. Or everything that is an affliction is non-virtuous, and that's also not true. Okay? For example, ignorance. Yeah, it's an affliction, the root affliction, but it itself is not non-virtuous. Okay, so true dukkha includes sentient beings and our environment. In the preceding chapters, we discussed our unsatisfactory state as sentient beings and our life experiences, as well as those are true sufferings, as well as true origins of these, ignorance, afflictions, and polluted karma. In this chapter, we'll look more closely at how the true origins of dukkha bring about the environments in which we sentient beings dwell. Okay, so the origin of the universe. Yeah, okay, where's our physicist? Yeah. So, similar to today, a vibrant topic of discussion among both religious and secular people in the Buddhist time centered on the origin and destruction of the universe. As recorded in the sutras, and there's many sutras in which you have these people coming to ask these questions to the Buddha. Okay, so as recorded in the sutras, they asked, was the universe eternal or not eternal? Transient or permanent? Finite or infinite? Did the universe have a beginning or was it beginningless? The Buddha refused to answer these questions because the people who asked them were thinking in terms of an inherently existent universe. So given their state of mind, thinking that the universe is inherently existent, then no matter how the Buddha could have responded, these people would have thought that either the universe existed inherently or did not exist at all. And because holding either of these views would have harmed these individuals, the Buddha chose not to respond. And he didn't respond, and of course, people criticized him. You know, what? We're supposed to be omniscient. Why aren't you telling us the right answer? Okay, this kind of stuff. So at other times, the Buddha refused to comment on the origin of the universe because it was not relevant to the alleviation of dukkha and the attainment of liberation. Okay, and so here's where we have the famous simile where the Buddha spoke about somebody getting shot by an arrow, and before he sought medical treatment to remove the arrow, he wanted to know who made it and what was it made out of and all this kind of stuff. Okay, which is very interesting if you're going to do a trial by court, but when you're bleeding and you're injured, it really doesn't matter what the arrow was made out of and who, you know, who shot it and how many miles per hour it was going and so forth. Abhidharma texts and the Kalachakra Tantra, however, commented on the evolution of the universe in conventional terms. Okay. Nowadays, scientists research these same topics, leading to fascinating dialogues between Buddhists and scientists, some of which I have attended. Okay, so there are several approaches that could be taken regarding the origin of the universe. First, we must investigate if it was created by a cause or if it arose causelessly. Okay, this kind of analysis, His Holiness does a lot. Okay, so you're investigating something. Was it created? And it has to be a functioning phenomena. Was it created by a cause or was it not created by a cause? Okay. If you say that something arose because it wasn't without a cause, then you're going to have a hard time giving an example of something that arose without a cause. Some of the Travakas give examples like the roundness of peas and the colors of a peacock feather. And they say that those things exist naturally without a cause. Yeah. But we all know that there are causes that make the pea round and causes that make the colors on a peacock feather. Okay. That no functioning thing comes about without a cause. Okay. So most people find causeless or random production unacceptable. So random production it's very similar to without a cause. And I remember how I learned about random production. Yeah, you can tell me if this, yeah. When they do experiments where there's lots of pegs and so there's a thing like this, there's lots of ups and down pegs. And then in the center above the pegs, halfway in the center point, you start dropping ping pong balls or some kind of balls. And if you drop a whole lot of them, at the end, the shape is going to be a bell curve. And they say that just happens randomly. Each ball where it is going randomly, and that shape is random. Am I describing it correctly? Yeah, more or less. Kind of. Maybe not so much. Give her the mic.
It's a slightly different use of the word random.
Uh-huh.
Right? Because there's still a cause in terms of how it's colliding. Right? Mm-hmm. We can watch it and see that. But the randomness in terms of you can use probability to describe that distribution, not worrying about those little differences and just modeling it probabilistically.
Mm.
So I think it's a slightly different use of the word random.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so randomness is more associated with probability. Yeah. Okay. But most people find causeless or random production unacceptable because in our daily lives, we witness effects arising from causes. Okay. Furthermore, it would be difficult for anything to function and change if it lacked causes and conditions. Why? Because permanent phenomena cannot interact with other things to produce something new. So here, impermanent, means something that is produced. It doesn't mean not eternal, Something like the mind stream is impermanent, it's changing every moment, but it is eternal. Yeah. And similarly, permanent means static, not changing moment to moment, but something that is permanent, like can come into existence and also go out of existence, but it does that without a cause. Okay. For example, we talk about the thermos. So the thermos is a functioning thing that came about due to causes. The emptiness of the thermos, the lack of inherent existence of the thermos, is permanent. But the thermos and its emptiness are one nature. And when the thermos came into existence, when it arose due to causes, its emptiness of inherent existence was there too at the same time. And when the thermos breaks, its emptiness, which is permanent, disappears, no longer exists. Okay. That clear? Yeah. Okay. So permanent phenomena cannot interact with other elements to produce something. Yeah. Among those who accept that the universe arose due to causes, okay, so your first thing is, did the universe arise due to a cause or not a cause? Okay, so you throw out not a cause, and most people say it arose due to a cause. Then, what was the cause? Okay, so theistic religions such as Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, and some branches of Hinduism speak of an external creator. Most scientists attribute the origin of the universe to the Big Bang, some asserting that one Big Bang began all existence, others saying there may have been several Big Bangs as different universes began. Yeah, so one bang after the other one. Yeah. Non-theistic Samkhyas, so the Samkhyas are a Hindu philosophical school, the ones we talked about yesterday, okay? So the non-theistic Samkhyas and some other traditions speak of a primal substance out of which everything was created. Buddhists speak of the interplay between the laws of nature and the law of karma and its effects. Okay, so quite different ways of attributing the cause. And that's a lot of in Pramnavartika, what Geshe Topke, when he was teaching that to us, went through was all these differentiations. For example, when people say there's a cause, but the cause is permanent. Okay, like God. God, arose without a cause. He doesn't change, and yet he causes the whole universe. And then the idea that things are basically permanent, but kind of impermanent too. Yeah, we talked about this, I think, yesterday as well. And then that idea. And then, so what you do is you're going through really refining what could possibly serve as causes. Okay, something permanent cannot be a cause. An external creator cannot be a cause. A chili seed cannot be a cause of a wall. Okay? So something is produced by a cause that is impermanent, and it's not just sufficient that the cause is impermanent, but the cause has to be concordant. It has to have the ability to produce that specific result. Okay? So, and we see lots of times, people will attribute discordant causes as the cause of something. Yeah, what's what? Ivermectin, is the cause of healing from COVID. Yeah. Well, you can assert that as the cause, but it's a discordant cause. It's not going to bring that result. Okay. So there's many conditions for something to be the proper cause of something. An example, at the beginning, the pandemic is a hoax. It's non-existent. There was no cause for it, and it doesn't exist. Yeah. Or it's going to, we were told that, then we were told it's going to go away by Easter. Yeah. And it didn't, that was whatever they attributed to making the COVID go away by Easter was the wrong cause. Yeah, that wasn't going to work. And so you can go through, and then Clorox. Yeah. Or what was it? What was the other one? Hydroxychloroquine was the treatment. Okay. So, there you see examples of discordant causes being said to be the causes. Okay. And I was thinking about it because we often kind of look around nowadays and say, like, what is happening that there's so much crazy stuff. But when you look historically, people were always putting out crazy stuff. They just didn't have Facebook and social media and all that kind of stuff to put it out on. But, that's why we all call it snake oil, because there used to be all these people going around in the States selling snake oil. What is snake oil? Is it oil from the snakes? Or you take the snakes and put them in oil and the oil becomes snake oil? But there were, all these people proposing all sorts of things, And when there were vaccines for smallpox, people did not want to take it. Yeah, they refused to take the vaccine for smallpox. So, we're just having a rerun, but times 1,000 because of rapid communication these days. Anyway, okay. Difficulties arise when we posit one original cause or event as the source of the universe with its mass, space, and time. If there were a single initial cause for all existence, be it a cosmic substance, dense matter, or a preceding intelligence. Okay, so if there were just one cause, like one of these things, what triggered that one cause to give rise to the universe with all of its complexity and diversity? So if there's one cause, that one cause, in order to bring a result, has to have conditions. It has to be affected by other factors to produce a result. So if you say, there's only one cause for the universe, then you're going to come up to something that's logically impossible, because one cause cannot produce something without being affected by other conditions. Okay? So change, such as the production of the universe, involves a complex interplay of many factors that influence one another. Since even the existence of something small like a flower involves multiple causes and conditions, needless to say, this is the case with more complex entities such as the universe. Okay, so we're going to stop here because we don't have time. The whole part that comes is quite important, so I don't want to rush through it. Any questions, comments?
Since precepts are a virtuous form, that seems to mean we are creating virtue every moment that we keep them. What happens when we have precepts, aren't breaking them, but get afflicted?
Okay, it's true as long as we have the precepts, then we are constantly creating virtue. Yeah. When we have a non-virtuous thought, okay, the precepts are still there, their form, but then in the mind you have a non-virtuous thought. So it's something different. Those two can exist together. Yeah. Just having a non-virtuous thought doesn't contradict, doesn't, what do you say, transgress a precept. When we're talking about the Pratimoksha precepts, when we talk about Bodhisattva and Tantric precepts, yes, there a thought can create a downfall. Mm-hmm.
Virtuous thoughts create or cause negative karma if we don't manifest them through actions or speech.
No, you can have a virtuous thought, and if it doesn't get manifest through action and speech, it's still a virtuous thought, and it still leaves good seeds in your mind to have similar kinds of thoughts in the future, and then by that, the power of your virtuous thoughts increases. Mm-hmm.
Is shamatha meditation and vipassana a form of purification?
Usually, you would say that you do purification and creation of merit before doing shamatha and vipassana. Okay? Because especially with shamatha, with creating serenity, single-pointed concentration, and so on, when we look at the hindrances to those, many of those hindrances that interfere and prevent us from concentrating are non-virtuous mental factors. Yeah? And also the seeds, when the mind is very obscured, it's harder to concentrate. So usually you would do purification, creation of merit, either before doing shamatha, in terms of focusing on one and then focusing on the other long term, or in one meditation session, we usually would take refuge. We do the 7 limb prayer, which is for purification and creation of merit, mandala offering to create merit. Then you would do your shamatha meditation or your vipassana meditation. So you're always emphasizing purification and creation of merit before doing these practices. Yeah. In terms of shamatha, is it itself pliancy, which is one element of getting shamatha? That's one of the 11 virtues. Okay. Vipassana, you're in, if you're using, it's interesting because you can develop concentration and then use it for non-virtuous actions, okay, like black magic and stuff like that. So, is shamatha itself virtuous? That's hard to say. The mental factor of pliancy is, and maybe when you're generating shamatha, you would have to practice a lot of non-attachment, non-anger, things like that, because if you didn't, then you would have attachment and anger, and those are hindrances to developing deep concentration. Okay. Vipassana, the wisdom that you would use in vipassana would be virtuous. Okay, if you're really, it would depend. You would have to have a virtuous intention too, I think, of wanting to be free of samsara, wanting to attain awakening, and so forth.
They say that, there's 6 different remedies recommended when you do the 4 powers, these 6 different practices. And the best one is meditation on emptiness. So meditation on emptiness, I would think, definitely purifies.
Yeah, but when Vipassana means different things to different people.
Yeah, it depends on what is your object of
Yeah.
Vipassana.
So that's what I was referring to. Like, many people say Vipassana, and it's watching the breath and watching the mental states. Yeah. So that's different than the Vipassana that's analyzing emptiness and generating that wisdom. Okay, last question.
I'm trying to draw connections between the teachings today and some prior teachings.
Between what?
The teachings today and some of the prior ideas. And we discussed the difference previously between seeds and latencies of the afflictions, which seem to relate to that first category of non-virtues, right? The natural non-virtues.
No, the seeds and latencies.
Sorry, the afflictions. The afflictions are the natural non-virtues.
One.
So I can see how there are seeds of the natural virtues. Are there latencies of the natural virtues?
Yeah, I think they would be there. And, they would not be a cognitive obscuration because they would continue on to Buddhahood. So just because it's a seed or a latency doesn't mean it has to be eliminated. So it'd be good, you can meet together and take some of these different things and do the thing with the points. What, 2 things. What's both? What's this one, not that one? What's that one, not this one? What's neither? And that's really, really helpful to understand these different kinds of categories and what's considered what. Okay.